My name is Claire Whitfield. I am 30 years old, and on the morning of March 4, 2024, I sat across a mahogany conference table on the 31st floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown Dallas, Texas, wearing a charcoal blazer I had picked out the night before, while a real estate attorney named Gerald Foss slid a manila folder across the table and said, quietly, "Ms. Whitfield, the deed transfer is complete. The property at 4712 Briarwood Lane is now yours." I did not cry. I did not smile. I looked at the address on the top of that document, the same address I had memoized at 8 years old because I used to press it into my palm like a bruise so I would never forget where I came from, and I simply said, "Thank you, Gerald." The woman sitting 2 chairs to my left said nothing. She had not spoken since she walked into the room. She was 61 years old. Her hair was silver now. She was wearing a cream-colored cardigan that looked like it had been ironed that morning with great care, as if the neatness of her clothes could hold together what was happening inside that room. Her name was Diane Whitfield. She was my mother. And the house she had just signed over to me, the house she had raised another family in after she left me, was the same house I had stood outside of, at age 19, in the rain, on a Tuesday night, with nowhere else to go. She had not let me in that night. She would not be making that decision anymore. But let me take you back to where this all began. It was August 14th, 2002. I was 8 years old. It was a Wednesday. I remember because my second-grade teacher, Mrs. Pearson, had told us that Wednesdays were for starting over. She had a little sign above her chalkboard that said that. I thought about that sign a lot in the years that followed. My mother woke me up early that morning. Earlier than school. The sun was barely over the rooftops on Briarwood Lane when she came into my room and set a small blue duffel bag on my bed. "Get dressed, baby," she said. "We're going on a trip." She called me baby. She still did it then. I put on my yellow sneakers, the ones with the Velcro straps because I hadn't learned to tie laces yet, and I climbed into the front seat of our 1999 Ford Taurus. My father was already in the driver's seat. He didn't turn around when I got in. He didn't say good morning. We drove for 40 minutes without music. We pulled into the Dallas Greyhound bus station on Commerce Street just before 7 a.m. My mother took my hand and walked me inside. The station smelled like burnt coffee and something sweet and synthetic, like a vending machine had been left open. The fluorescent lights buzzed. There were maybe a dozen people scattered on plastic chairs, some sleeping, some staring at nothing. She sat me down in a chair near the far wall, chair number 11, next to a cracked pillar and a water fountain that made a clicking sound every few minutes. She unzipped my duffel bag and showed me what was inside. A peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a juice box, a change of clothes, and a small white envelope with my name written on it in her handwriting. Claire. She zipped the bag back up. She smoothed my hair with her hand, one long, slow stroke, like she was memoizing the feeling. "Someone is coming to get you," she said. "You wait right here." I looked up at her. "Where are you going?" She didn't answer. She kissed my forehead. And she walked back out through the glass doors. I watched through the station window as she got back into the Ford Taurus. My father didn't look back. They drove away. I waited in that chair for 4 hours. Nobody came. I was found by a station worker named Roy Delgado, a heavy-set man with a kind face and a badge that said Greyhound Customer Services. He had noticed me sitting in the same spot since before his shift started. He brought me a cup of apple juice from the break room and sat down next to me. "You waiting for somebody, sweetheart?" "My mom said someone is coming," I told him. He nodded slowly. "Okay. What's your name?" "Claire Whitfield." He called the Dallas Police Department at 11:23 a.m. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. A woman officer named Sandra Reyes knelt down in front of me and asked me if I knew my address. I told her 4712 Briarwood Lane. She wrote it down. They drove me home. But when Officer Reyes knocked on the door of 4712 Briarwood Lane, nobody answered. She knocked 3 more times. The house was empty. My parents were gone. I was placed in the Lakeview Children's Home on Samuel Boulevard in East Dallas 4 days later. I was 8 years old, and I carried a blue duffel bag, a peanut butter sandwich wrapper, an empty juice box, and a white envelope I had not yet opened. I did not open it for 6 years. I kept it in the side pocket of the duffel bag, tucked under the lining, folded so small it was almost invisible. Every time I moved, and I moved 4 times in the first 3 years, that envelope came with me. I did not know why I kept it. I think I was afraid that whatever was inside it was the last real thing my mother had ever given me. And if I opened it, and the words were wrong, if they were cold, or short, or explained nothing, then I would have nothing left to hold on to. So I held on to the mystery instead. That envelope would become the most important piece of paper in this entire story. But not yet. The Lakeview Children's Home had 42 kids when I arrived. Some had been there since they were infants. Some, like me, remembered what a real kitchen smelled like on a Sunday morning. That was the group that had the hardest time. The ones who remembered. I was assigned to room 7B, a room with 4 bunk beds and a single window that looked out onto the parking lot. My bunk was the bottom left. Above me slept a girl named Priya, who was 11 and read science textbooks for fun. She would become my closest friend for the next 4 years. "Why do you carry that bag everywhere?" she asked me once, maybe a month after I arrived. "Because it has everything I own," I said. She thought about that for a moment. "Then I would carry it everywhere too," she said. She never asked about the envelope. The woman who ran Lakeview was named Margaret Hollis. She was 63 years old, small-framed with sharp eyes and a grey bun that never came undone. She was not warm in the conventional sense. She did not hug children or bake cookies. But she was fair. Brutally fair. And in a world where most things felt random and unexplained, fair was everything. On my first day, she sat me down across from her desk and said, "Claire, this is not a permanent place. It is a bridge. Your job is to cross it." I was 8. I didn't fully understand. But something in the way she said it made me believe her. She became the one person in my early life who treated my future as a fact, not a possibility. In 3rd grade, she noticed I was reading 3 grade levels ahead. She enrolled me in a gifted program at Lakewood Elementary on Gaston Avenue without being asked. She drove me herself the first day. In 6th grade, when a caseworker suggested I might need to be moved to a group home in Fort Worth, Margaret Hollis said, "That child is not going to Fort Worth. She is going to college." I was 11. I had never once heard an adult say that about me. I kept that sentence in the same internal pocket as the envelope. Middle school was the hardest stretch. Not because of abuse or dramatic cruelty. The movies always want a villain in every room. But real pain is quieter than that. Real pain is a science fair where no parent comes. It is a Mother's Day card project in 5th grade that you turn in blank because the teacher forgot to think about who might be in her classroom. It is a birthday that passes like any other Thursday. I turned 13 in room 7B with a grocery store cake that Priya had somehow convinced a night counselor to buy. There were no candles. We used a flashlight. I blew it out anyway. And I made a wish I have never told anyone. In 8th grade, a guidance counselor named Mr. Tanner looked over my file and said, with genuine confusion rather than malice, "You know, Claire, kids from your background, statistically, college is a stretch. Have you thought about vocational programs?" I smiled at him. I said, "Yes, sir. I've thought about a lot of things." I went home that afternoon and wrote down the names of every university in Texas with a full scholarship program. There were 14. I applied to all 14. Before I go any further, if you have ever sat in a room where someone looked at you and decided your ceiling before you even had a chance to reach for it, drop the word bridge in the comments right now. Because that is what this story is about. Not revenge. Not rage. It is about the distance between where they leave you and where you end up. Subscribe to Orphan Origins if you are new here. Every story on this channel is real in the way that matters most. In the feelings, in the silence, in the years that shape you when nobody is watching. We are just getting started. I received a full academic scholarship to the University of Texas at Dallas in May of 2012. I was 17 years old. Margaret Hollis drove me to the financial aid office herself. She sat in the waiting room while I signed the papers. When I came out holding the award letter, she looked at it for a long moment without speaking. Then she said, "Cross the bridge, Claire." That was all. She never said she was proud of me. She didn't need to. I felt it in the way she held the door open on the way out, like I was someone whose path deserved to be clear. I studied finance at UT Dallas. I worked 22 hours a week at a coffee shop on Campbell Road called Grounds and Grace to cover living expenses not included in the scholarship. I learned to budget $180 a month for food. I learned to say no to things my classmates took for granted, spring break trips, new laptops, any purchase over $40 that wasn't essential. I graduated in May 2016 with a 3.91 GPA and a job offer from Callaway and Marsh Financial Group on Kinney Avenue in Uptown Dallas. Starting salary, $54,000 a year. I remember standing in my empty studio apartment on Greenville Avenue the night before my first day, no furniture yet, just a sleeping bag and a lamp, and thinking, I have a salary. I said it out loud to the empty room. I have a salary. Nobody was there to hear it. I ordered one slice of pizza from the place down the street. I ate it on the floor. It was the best meal I had ever had. By 2019, I was a senior financial analyst at Callaway and Marsh. I was making $91,000 a year. I had moved into a one-bedroom apartment on Congress Avenue in Austin for a brief relocation, then back to Dallas when I was promoted to portfolio director. I bought my first piece of furniture, a real one, not from a yard sale, in February 2019. A dining table from a shop on Lower Greenville. Solid oak. 6 chairs. I put it in my apartment and sat at it alone for dinner every night for 3 months, because I liked the feeling of having a place to sit that I had chosen, that was mine, that no one could take back. I still had the blue duffel bag. It lived in the top of my closet. I had still not opened the envelope. I tried to find my mother once. February 2018. I hired a skip tracer named Davis Hill, $400 flat fee, paid on a Tuesday, results within 10 business days. He found her in 12 days. He sent me an address. 4712 Briarwood Lane. She had never left the house. She had come back. I sat with that information for 3 weeks. I drove past the house once on a Sunday evening in March. The lights were on. There was a car. In the driveway I didn't recognize, a silver Lexus SUV. There were flower boxes in the front windows. The kind you plant in spring. I drove away. I did not stop. But 6 months later, I went back. I rang the doorbell at 4712 Briarwood Lane on a rainy Tuesday night in September 2018. I was 24 years old. I was wearing my work blazer. I had driven straight from the office. A man answered the door first. He was maybe 40, clean-cut, curious. Can I help you? Is Diane Whitfield here? I said. A pause. Who's asking? Her daughter. Another pause, longer this time, and then my mother appeared in the doorway behind him. She looked at me for a long time. I looked at her. She had aged, softly, not harshly. Her hair was lighter. She was wearing a cardigan, same as always. She had always loved cardigans. She said, Claire. Not a question. Not a greeting. Just my name, like she was confirming something to herself. I just wanted to see if you were okay, I said. I don't know why I said that. I had prepared other things. That is what came out. She glanced at the man behind her. Then back at me. This isn't a good time, she said. And she closed the door. I stood on the porch for 11 seconds. I counted them. Then I walked back to my car, drove to my apartment, sat at my oak dining table, and did not move for an hour. That was the last time I went to 4712 Briarwood Lane as a visitor. And then, 3 weeks after I made Director of Acquisitions at Callaway and Marsh, the phone rang. It was a number I had never seen before. It was a Dallas area code. And the voice on the other end was not my mother's. The call came at 9:17 p.m. on a Thursday in November 2021. I almost didn't answer. I was reading a portfolio report, half a glass of wine on the table, the kind of quiet evening I had built my entire adult life to protect. I answered on the 4th ring. Is this Claire Whitfield? A man's voice. Professional. Measured. Yes, I said. My name is Gerald Foss. I'm a real estate and estate attorney with Foss & Carver LLP on Commerce Street in Dallas. I'm calling because I've been trying to reach you for some time. I represent the estate of a man named Harold Kessler. I didn't recognize the name. I think you may have known him as Roy, he said. I went very still. Roy. The Greyhound station. The man who brought me apple juice. The man who called the police. The man who had sat next to an 8-year-old girl in a bus station and treated her like she was worth sitting next to. Roy Delgado. I whispered. Harold Roy Delgado, yes, the attorney said. He passed away on October 29th. He had no living family. He named you as his sole beneficiary. I set down my wine glass. I don't understand, I said. He didn't know me. I was 8 years old. He knew you, Gerald Foss said quietly. He kept track of you for 22 years, Ms. Whitfield. Well, there is quite a bit in the file. I'd prefer to go over it in person, if you're able. I was in his office the next morning at 8 a.m. What I found inside that file changed everything I thought I knew about the day my mother left me. Gerald Foss's office was on the 4th floor of a building on Commerce Street, 2 blocks from the Greyhound station. I noted that when I parked. I don't think it was a coincidence. He was a tall man, late 50s, with reading glasses and the kind of calm that comes from spending decades in rooms where people cry. He opened the file. Roy Delgado had worked at the Dallas Greyhound station for 31 years. He retired in 2014. He lived alone in a small house in Oak Cliff. He had no children. He had a savings account, a paid-off car, and a house worth $187,000. All of it, the car, the savings, the house, left to me. But that was not the part that stopped my breathing. Gerald Foss reached into the file and pulled out a plastic sleeve containing a photograph and a folded piece of paper. The photograph was of me. 8 years old. Yellow sneakers. Blue duffel bag. Sitting in chair number 11 of the Dallas Greyhound bus station. Roy had taken it that day. He had kept it. And the folded piece of paper was a handwritten note. Gerald read it aloud, because my hands were shaking too hard to hold it steady. Claire, I don't know if you remember me. I'm the man who sat next to you. I want you to know I thought about you every year after that day. I asked around, found out you were at Lakeview. I called once but they wouldn't tell me anything. I hope you turned out okay. I think you did. You had the kind of eyes that pay attention. Kids who pay attention usually find a way. Leave the station a better way than you came in. That's all any of us can do. Roy. I sat in that chair for a long time after Gerald finished reading. Then I asked the question I needed to ask. You said you'd been trying to reach me for some time. How long? Gerald looked at me carefully. Roy passed in October, but he updated his will in June of this year. Before that, the previous version of the will left everything to a literacy charity. He changed it 6 months ago. Why? I asked. What happened 6 months ago? Gerald opened a second folder. He received a visit, he said. From your mother. The room got very quiet. My mother had found Roy Delgado. She had gone to see him, in June 2021, and according to the notes Roy had left with his attorney, she had asked him one question. Did he remember the little girl from the bus station in 2002? He had said yes. She had asked if he knew what had happened to her. He had said he didn't know. She had left without explaining why she came. 2 weeks later, Roy had changed his will. My mother had gone looking for me. Not to find me, but to find out if someone had. And that question, the reason she went, what she was actually looking for, what she knew about that day that I didn't, that was the question I had been carrying for 22 years inside an unopened white envelope. I drove home from Gerald Foss's office on Commerce Street, went to my closet, reached into my old blue duffel bag, and took out the envelope. I sat at my oak dining table. I opened it. It was 1 page. My mother's handwriting. Dated August 14, 2002. Claire, baby. I am so sorry. I did not want to leave you. Your father said if I didn't, he would take you somewhere I would never find you. I thought if I left you somewhere public, somewhere safe, someone would take care of you and I could come back. I was going to come back. I swear to you I was going to come back. But by the time I left him, 2 years later, they told me you had been adopted. They told me you had a new family. They told me you were okay. I believed them because I needed to. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I sat with it for a very long time. There are moments in a life where you realize the story you have been living is not the only version of the story. There was a version where my mother was a monster who chose her own comfort over her child. And there was a version where my mother was a frightened woman who made a catastrophic decision under pressure and spent the next 19 years believing I was safe somewhere. Neither version erased the parking lot. Neither version erased the bus station. Neither version erased room 7B, or the Mother's Day card, or the closed door in September 2018. But one version was true. And truth, even when it doesn't fix anything, changes the weight of what you carry. I still had one question that the letter didn't answer. Who had told my mother I was adopted? And why? If you felt that, if your heart just did something complicated, drop the word envelope in the comments. Because that is what this story is. It is not a simple story about a villain and a victim. It is a story about what happens inside a family when one person's fear destroys another person's life, and what justice looks like when you are the one who has to define it yourself. Subscribe to Orphan Origins. Share this video with someone who needs it. And keep watching, because the hardest part of this story hasn't happened yet. I hired a private investigator named Sandra Voss, no relation to Gerald, in January 2022. She had an office on Oak Lawn Avenue and a file system so organized it made me feel comfortable immediately. She charged $125 an hour. I told her to find out who told my mother I had been adopted in 2004. It took her 6 weeks. The answer was not from the state. The answer was not from Lakeview. The answer was from a woman named Patricia Holbrook. My father's sister. My aunt. Patricia Holbrook had called my mother in early 2004, 2 years after the bus station. My mother had left my father by then and was trying, according to phone records Sandra pulled, to locate me through the Department of Family and Protective Services. She had called twice. She had written one letter. Patricia had found out about those calls. And Patricia, who had always despised my mother, who had always believed my mother was beneath their family, who had used the abandonment as permanent ammunition against her, had called my mother and told her, the girl has been adopted. She has a new family in Houston. She is happy. Don't disrupt her life. None of it was true. I was never adopted. I was never in Houston. I was on Samuel Boulevard in East Dallas, in room 7B, sleeping under a window that faced a parking lot. Patricia Holbrook had known exactly where I was. She had told my mother I was gone so my mother would stop looking. And it had worked. For 19 years. I drove to Patricia Holbrook's house in Richardson, Texas, on a Wednesday morning in March 2022. She was 67 years old and lived in a beige house on a quiet street with a ceramic rooster on the porch that I found profoundly inappropriate. I rang the bell. She answered in a housecoat, coffee cup in hand, and stared at me for a long moment. Then, Claire. Hello, Aunt Patricia. She blinked. Stepped back slightly, like a door being pushed by wind it wasn't expecting. How did you? I know what you told her, I said. I know what you did. I'm not here to argue about it. I'm here so you know that I know. She opened her mouth. Don't, I said quietly. She closed it. I looked at her for a long, even moment. Then I said, you should call my mother. You owe her a conversation. And I walked back to my car. I did not slam the door. I did not raise my voice. She watched me from her porch until I turned the corner. I never went back. By 2022, I was 30 years old and had been promoted to Director of Acquisitions at Callaway and Marsh. My annual compensation was $148,000. I managed a real estate portfolio worth $42 million across North Texas. Real estate had become my specialty, not by accident. Every property I analyzed, I thought about addresses. About what it means to belong to a place. About how a home is not just an asset, it is evidence that you exist somewhere on this earth and have the right to stay. I was good at it. I was exceptionally good at it. In January 2023, I was approached by a private equity group called Crestwood Capital about leading their Texas residential acquisitions division. The offer was $190,000 base plus performance bonuses. I would have my own team of 6 analysts. My own floor in their Meridian Tower offices. I accepted. On my first day, I walked into the 31st floor of Meridian Tower in downtown Dallas, stood at the window, and looked out over the city. I could see, in the far distance, the neighborhood where Briarwood Lane Saturday. I looked at it for a long time. I had not spoken to my mother since the closed door in September 2018. After reading the letter, after learning the truth about Patricia, I sat with the question of what to do with my mother for almost a year. She had not known I was still in Dallas. She had believed I was in Houston with a family. She had been lied to by her own sister-in-law. But she had also been the one who put me in the chair. She had also driven away. Both things were true. In February 2023, I called her. She answered on the second ring. She had been expecting this call, I think, for a very long time. Claire, she said. I know about Patricia, I said. I know what she told you. Silence. I also know you tried to find me. More silence. Then, very quietly, every year. I tried every year. I know, I said. Claire, what he did to us. I'm not ready for that conversation yet, I said. I just wanted you to know that I know the full story now. I'm not going to pretend I'm okay. But I'm not going to pretend I don't exist anymore either. She was crying by then. Quietly. The kind of crying that has been waiting a long time. What do you need from me? She asked. Nothing yet, I said. I'll let you know. I hung up. I went to see Margaret Hollis. She was still in Dallas, retired now, living in a small house in Lakewood, 2 miles from the elementary school she had driven me to 21 years earlier. She was 74. Smaller than I remembered. But her eyes were the same, sharp, steady, certain. I sat across from her at her kitchen table and told her everything. The letter. Roy. Patricia. The phone call. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands on the table. What do you plan to do with the house? She asked. Not which house. She already understood. I don't know yet, I said honestly. Yes you do, she said. She refilled my coffee cup. Cross the bridge, Claire, she said. Finish crossing it. In September 2023, a property came across my desk at Crestwood Capital. 4712 Briarwood Lane, Dallas, Texas. My mother had listed it for sale. I stared at that address on my monitor for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I know because I watched the clock. The listing price was $374,000. The property was structurally sound, well-maintained, in a neighborhood with rising comps. It was a good acquisition for any buyer. I called Gerald Foss. Gerald, I said, I need to make an offer on a residential property. Personal acquisition. Not through Crestwood. Of course, he said. Which property? I gave him the address. A pause. Claire, full asking price, I said. Cash offer. Close in 30 days. Seller does not need to know the buyer's identity until the day of closing. Another pause. Are you sure? I have been sure about this for 22 years, I said. The closing was set for March 4, 2024. I arrived at the Meridian Tower conference room at 8:45 a.m. My mother arrived at 9 a.m. with her real estate agent, a pleasant woman who had no idea what was about to happen. My mother walked into the room and saw me. She stopped. Her agent took one look at both of us and seemed to sense, with professional instinct, that something beyond real estate was occurring. My mother sat down slowly. Gerald Foss moved through the paperwork with quiet efficiency. He explained the cash purchase. He explained the clean title transfer. He named the buyer. Claire Whitfield. My mother's pen hovered above the signature line for a long moment. I did not look away from her. She looked up at me. Not with anger. Not with shame, exactly. With something harder to name. The look of someone who has spent 21 years imagining a moment and is now discovering the real thing is both smaller and larger than the imagination could hold. You didn't have to do it this way, she said, quietly. I know, I said. Then why? I thought about Roy Delgado, keeping a photograph for 22 years. I thought about Margaret Hollis, driving a little girl to school. I thought about a white envelope sitting unopened in a blue duffel bag for 6 years. Because I needed to finish something, I said. And so did you. She looked at me for another long moment. Then she signed her name. Gerald Foss slid the deed across the table to me. Ms. Whitfield, the deed transfer is complete. The property at 4712 Briarwood Lane is now yours. I looked at the address. I thought about chair number 11. I thought about yellow sneakers with Velcro straps. Thank you, Gerald, I said. The room was very quiet. My mother and I sat in that conference room for 40 minutes after the closing, after Gerald and the real estate agent had quietly excused themselves. It was the longest conversation we had ever had as adults. She told me about my father, about the years before the bus station, about the fear, about the night he told her he would disappear with me if she didn't do what he said. He had been a man who used love as a hostage. She had made a catastrophic decision with the tools she had. I do not excuse it. But I understand it in a way I could not at 8 years old. She told me about calling DFPS. About the phone calls. About Patricia's lie. She told me she had driven past Lakeview Children's Home once in 2006. She had sat outside in her car and watched children play in the yard, trying to spot a little girl with yellow sneakers. I don't know if I was in that yard that day. I might have been. We did not hug when we left. We were not ready for that yet. But we walked out of the Meridian Tower together, and we stood on the sidewalk in the March morning air, and she said, "What are you going to do with the house?" I had thought about this for months. "I'm going to renovate it," I said. "And then I'm going to donate it to a transitional housing program for kids aging out of foster care." She looked at me. "In Roy's name," I added. Something moved across her face that I did not have a word for then. I have thought about it since. I think it was relief. The particular relief of someone who has been waiting a very long time to find out if the damage they caused left something living on the other side of it. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. We went our separate ways. Patricia Holbrook called my mother 6 weeks after the closing. I don't know what was said. My mother told me only that it was a long call, and that it ended with Patricia crying. And that she, my mother, had hung up first. She told me that the way someone reports a small, private victory. I understood. It is May 2024 as I record this. I am 30 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment on Turtle Creek Boulevard in Dallas, Texas. I have a dining table with 6 chairs that I still eat at alone most nights, and I have decided that I do not find that sad anymore. I find it peaceful. There is a difference, and learning the difference took me most of my 20s. I am the Director of Acquisitions at Crestwood Capital. My team closed $61 million in residential transactions last year. We are on track to exceed that this year. I am in the early stages of establishing the Roy Delgado Foundation, a nonprofit that will provide transitional housing and financial literacy resources for young adults aging out of the Texas foster care system. The first property in the program is a renovated 3-bedroom house at 4712 Briarwood Lane in Dallas. It will be ready in September. I have spoken to my mother 7 times since March. We are not close. We are not estranged. We are 2 people learning, very carefully and very slowly, what it is possible to build after a long demolition. I have no interest in rushing it. I have learned that some things take the time they take. I still have the blue duffel bag. It lives on the top shelf of my closet, same as always. The envelope is empty now, folded small, tucked back inside the way I found it. I have thought about throwing it away. I keep it instead. Not because I need the evidence. Not because the pain still demands space. But because I want to remember the girl who carried it for 22 years without opening it, who understood, at some unspoken level, that sometimes you have to hold the mystery long enough to survive, before you can be strong enough to know the truth. She was wiser than I gave her credit for. She was 8 years old, in yellow sneakers, in chair number 11, and she was paying attention. She still is. They left you behind. They drove away, or they walked away, or they looked straight at you and chose something else. And maybe, there was a reason. A fear, a lie, a threat, a broken person making a broken decision with broken tools. Maybe there was no reason at all. Either way, you were in the chair. Either way, you had to wait. Either way, you had to learn how to cross a bridge that nobody built for you, using only the things you could carry. And you carried them. If you grew up without a parent in the audience, if you have ever turned in a Mother's Day card with nothing on it, if you have ever stood at the door of a home that should have been yours and been told this is not a good time, then you know what it is to build yourself from the inside out. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. My name is Claire Whitfield. I was left in a bus station at 8 years old. I am 30 now. And I own the bridge. If this story meant something to you, if you felt any part of it, like this video and subscribe to Orphan Origins. Drop chair 11 in the comments if you made it to the end. I want to know you were here. And if you have your own origin story, your own bus station, your own envelope, your own bridge, share it below. We read every single one. This has been Orphan Origins. Every orphan has a story. This was mine.